Hi, I'm Paul with American Hydroponics, and welcome to our monthly webinar, Seeding Your Hydroponic System. Now, what we're going to do this afternoon is talk about a few different ways, very common ways, of how you seed your hydroponic system. Two of our master growers, Ginny Harris and Joe Swartz, are here to help us and to demonstrate these different techniques. Again, you don't have to be a master hydroponic gardener to do these. These are very basic. These are what you will start doing when you buy a system from American Hydroponics. So watch closely. If you have any questions or comments, use the question and comment section of the website. Type those in, and we will take those as we have time. Anyway, let's get started. Jenny is going to talk about, first of all, hand seeding.
Hi, so today I'm going to show you just basically how to hand seed some of the most common kinds of seed that we have. What we like to use here is Oasis. This is Oasis. This is thin cut Oasis, and you'll also see some of the other Oasis we use. You can use a rock wool. You can use any kind of grow cubes, but for this, they should all come in a standard 10-20 size that fits into a standard 10-20 tray. But this is Oasis. This is what we're using. You can kind of see if I go like this, it's scored a little bit. So each one of those, when you actually go to plant, will break apart. So this is dry Oasis. So what I do is I start with dry Oasis. I set it in a tray, and I'm going to set this down because I've already kind of wet some down. And I fully wet my Oasis. I just take it, and I just, what I have in here, let me stop back a second and show you. What I have is we have some Essential. It's some root accelerator, and it just really helps the roots grow and take root. You don't have to have it. You can do this also just with water, but we like to use the Oasis. You can see when I pour it out, I don't know if you can see, it's kind of a dark brown. That's from the Essential. So I get everything. I make sure that the Oasis is really nice and wet all the way through, and the Oasis has wicked everything up. If you can see in here, you actually see that the water has come up through the holes, so you know that everything is fully wicked up, because you don't want any dry spots in your Oasis. Then what you're going to do, and this is going to be a little bit of a trick, you're actually going to you're going to drain your Oasis, and I have a bucket right here. You're just going to drain your Oasis. And I don't know if you can kind of see the different color of the Oasis as it's draining out a little bit. You don't want it sopping wet. It's messy. It's just too hard to handle. But you definitely want it soaked all the way through. You drain it. Then I'm going to show you a couple of different kinds of seeds. If you've watched our webinars before, you know we like to use seeds primarily from Johnny's. We order from Johnny's, and we use seeds from Paramount Seeds. They're super high quality seeds. If you have a local company that grows seeds and they're high quality, we encourage you to use that. But we don't just generally run down to the store and buy seeds. We like to come and use the seeds that we know are really gonna work for us, since we have commercial quality crops. So what I've put out here, as you can see, so you see the different types of seeds. You can see the basil seed, and they're super tiny. You're going to seed any seeds like this generally that are super tiny. You're going to put about 7 to 10 seeds in each cube. Same with the arugula here. Kale looks a lot like this too. You can see they're very, very small. The raw lettuce is even smaller and a little more difficult. The thing about raw lettuce seeds is you only want to put one of these seeds. Each one of these seeds will grow into a head of lettuce. Whereas a bunch of basil, you want a whole bunch of stems coming up. Same with arugula, you want a whole bunch coming up. But with the lettuce, you really only want one lettuce head per cube, unless you're doing some kind of mix. So what this actually is, this is called a lettuce mix, and this is what we use for our baby lettuce mix. That is, we put these kind of seeds in there, and then we cut them as baby lettuce leaves. We don't ever let them get to a full head. Now, these seeds right here are called pelleted seeds. You can see them. They're covered in a clay, and they're this same seed. Let's see. They're one of these same seeds right here, just covered in clay. You can tell, much easier to handle. These are what we use if you want to grow a head of lettuce, because they're so much easier to handle. And you can get both Johnny's, Paramount, any of the seeds companies almost always sell both the raw and the pelleted version. But pelleted is so popular that most people use those. And the last thing I just kind of wanted to show you here, these happen to be sunflower seeds. We're growing dwarf sunflowers, but these will be vine crops. Generally, the vine crops are a little bit bigger. Not always. Tomato seeds are tiny, but like cucumber seeds and the melons, they're a little bit bigger. So that's kind of the basic seeds we have. So what we're going to do is we're going to first just take some of our pelleted seeds. And in this case, I'm going to take them right off here so we don't waste any seeds. And these are a lettuce. This is summer crisp lettuce. So we're going to take these, and all you're going to really do is you're just going to drop one per hole, just exactly like that. And I always start at one end and work at the other so we can really easily, systematically see what all we've harvested and not. So you're just going to go through here, and you're just going to go just like this. You can see, you might think, oh my gosh, hand seeding, that takes so long. But you can see it really doesn't take that long. So I'm just going to seed those 2 rows right there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a Sharpie, and you see these little plastic gardening sticks. They're coming super helpful in your greenhouse, because what you're going to do is you're going to then write on here what these seeds were, because all the pelleted seeds look the same. You have no idea. Some of them come orange, some of them come white, some of them come tan, and you have no idea what kind of lettuce they are. And even as they're sprouting up, you can't always tell. So what I'm going to do on this little garden plastic stick is I'm going to write that this is a summer crisp lettuce. I'm going to write the date I planted it, and I'm going to write this lot number right here that all the seed companies put on their seeds. And I'm going to write that on here, and I'm going to stick it right in my oasis like this. So as it grows up, I know that's what that is. So that's one way. The pelleted, they're the easiest to harvest. Now this is a little bit of a trick. So we're going to harvest some arugula now. Arugula. And this is just how I like to harvest it. Different people do it different ways. I just get a cardstock. I keep the same cardstock out in my greenhouse, and I pour just some arugula seeds in there. Obviously, normally I'm seeding a lot more arugula because it's super popular and people like it. And all you're doing is you're scooching off into it. You're just going to put about, I don't know if you can get a close-up of this and see about how many seeds that we're doing. And I'm doing it a little bit slow so you guys can see. Normally, I kind of run like a demon through these things. And even though I'm seeding, 288 or almost 300 arugula cubes, it goes pretty quickly. So, and then what you can do, you can see I've kind of, some of the arugulas are off. Usually what I do is I just kind of take the plastic thing and I just kind of do this and I scoop them all back into so you don't have any random ones sitting out there. So that's arugula. I do the same thing with kale, same exact way. Raw lettuce, if you're going to do a lettuce mix, you're going to do the same sort of thing. And you're just going to put them in there, and you're going to do the same sort of exact thing, and you're just going to kind of scooch a few of them in there, just like that. You can kind of see, you can go a little quickly on it. Same exact sort of thing. So I'm going to leave that. The last thing I want to show you is basil, and we're going to come back to it. Because basil, we've got a trick for how you seed basil. So as you know, the basil seed, right, they're tiny, tiny little black seeds. They're slightly bigger than a flea. And you're going to put some basil in a cup. So you can see that's going to be way too much, but let me. So about 1/8 of an ounce. And the cups we like to use have the little markers for measuring. And I'm just going to get this wet right here. I'm going to just fill it up with water. So this is what it looks like. Dry basil seeds going in there and fill it up with water. Now we're going to come back to that in just a minute, and I'm going to show you the trick to wet basil seeds.
So hi everybody. So as Jenny was showing with the seeding your cubes with your lettuce or your leaf crops, it's very, very straightforward and very, very simple. However, with a lot of systems, especially when we're talking about lettuce growers who are seeding one individual seed per cube, it can become very time consuming and sometimes difficult. Even a small to mid-size operation, an operation such as this size right here, you could be seeding several thousand cubes a week. And as I said, that can take a fair amount of time. And if you take a look, this is our Oasis. These are the 162 sheets. So this is one sheet of Oasis 40 cubes, and there are 162 individual cells. So if we're seeding, let's say, our pelleted lettuce seed, and we're seeding each individual cell, it can take a long time, and for some of us, like myself, can make your eyes cross after a little while. So a good economical option, a piece of equipment that I highly recommend even for small to mid-sized growers, is a vacuum seeder. It costs just a few $100s, and it's a very, very simple, basic machine, but it can speed up your seeding time and make your life immensely easier. This is one of the pieces of equipment that myself as a grower, I resisted to buying for several years, and once I bought it, I can't believe I ever did without it. So basically the way it's set up is this is basically a cedar box. This is just a simple box with an aluminum cover. Now these aluminum covers are interchangeable, so you can actually have these made specifically with holes in them for the right size for whatever you're seeding, but also to match whatever growing media you're using. So if you're using Oasis, or you're using cocoa fiber blocks, or other plugs, they have different spacing between them. So you can have cedar plates made for that specific seed and that specific growing media. And these are all interchangeable. So I have one of these cedars, and I have several different plates for several different crops. Again, makes things much easier. It's very quick. So what you do is once the aluminum plate is installed on the box, it's connected to a very simple shop vac. And so when the shop vac is turned on, what it does is it creates suction at each one of these holes. So we can fill this plate with seeds, move it around a little bit, takes a little bit of maneuvering, and one seed will stick at each hole spacing. Then we can pour off the rest of the seeds and then seed them directly into our tray. So I'm going to do it slow, and I'm going to talk through it. But once you get, it takes a little practice sometimes, but once you get a rhythm going, you can seed several trays a minute. So if we're seeding a few thousand trays, maybe we're seeding 8 or 10 Oasis cubes, we can literally be done in 10 or 15 minutes and have very nice uniform seeding. So it definitely will make your life easier. So again, as I said, it takes a little bit of practice. Sometimes first-time growers are a little frustrated with it, but it's very straightforward, and we'll run through it right now. So we just basically have some of the pelleted lettuce seed. This is, as Jenny was showing, the raw lettuce seed is kind of long and irregular shape. In some cases, they coat it with, this is a clay coating. It's a pelleted coating. Helps one make a nice uniform size, makes seeding easier, but then also helps absorb water when you're germinating and actually helps give you better germination. So the pelleted lettuce seed is a little more expensive than regular lettuce seed, but I highly recommend most growers use it. Makes a better quality product. So anyway, let's get started. Let's try. So what you need to do is have a nice clear area set up. You need to have your cedar set and however many trays of Oasis or whatever other cubes you're using. So the seeds are set. I have everything I need. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to talk over the vacuum a little bit. So now we have suction at all of the holes. So we pour the seeds out. And basically all we're going to do, and as I said, it takes a little bit of practice, a little bit of doing, but basically all we're doing is just swishing the seeds around so all the seeds cover each of the holes. And once that's done, then we move all the seeds down and we pour out the excess. And expect several times to have to go back and catch a few. So as you can see, there's a seed in every hole. So now we just take the Oasis and we flip it over. And this is the part where it takes a little bit of practice. Very carefully, you want to set your Oasis over the seeds. And then we're going to pick it up. We're going to hold the Oasis and the cedar plate and just flip. And we shut off our vacuum and we disconnect the tube. And that basically cuts the vacuum at the hole. So now all the seeds should fall through. We give it a little tap. And as you can see, we now have one seed in every hole. Once you get, talking through it takes a few minutes, but once you get started, you can do several trays a minute. Now, as Jenny was showing, What we then do with these is we water these down very, very heavily. We drain them down, we put them in our propagation systems, and then they go from there. So this is a very relatively inexpensive piece of equipment that will save you a lot of time, help give you better, more uniform crops. So I highly recommend you getting one if you can. Leaf growers all over the world use these with great success.
All right, hi there. So now we're going to look at seeding basil. And if you'll remember, the basil seeds are those tiny, tiny seeds, and they're pretty hard to seed, even doing it the way I did with the card. So what you see here is you saw I just put some plain basil seeds in here and just added water. And so now if you look at these seeds, they kind of have a little gelatinous coating on them. And we just take a dropper that we get from the drugstore. This one happens to be a 5 ml dropper. You suck up seeds, and all you're going to do is you're going to go through here, and you see how quick that is. And you're just going to go through here. You're going to suck up, and then you can see how quickly. Basil is a super hot seller for most of our growers. So seeding basil, there's usually a lot of it. Yeah, and you just go through here, and because you're just using water, it doesn't matter that it's going into the Oasis cube. So there you go. That's how you wet seed basil. That easy.
Excellent. Okay, so now that we've got our leaf crops all seeded, we're going to talk sometimes about vine crops. And for some growers who are growing tomatoes or peppers or cucumbers, this is a little bit different. When we're growing our leaf crops in an NFT system, just like what you see here. Now, in this system here, in under 3,000 square feet, we have over 10,000 plant spaces. So obviously, if we're seeding one individual cube per plant spacing, we're seeding a lot of cubes. With the vine crop system, it's a little bit different. We're growing singular plants that are very large and grow for a very long time. So a similar size system would only have about 250 to 300 actual vine crops. So, and they're only seeded once every year or twice every year. So basically, this is much easier to do by hand. Most growers, unless they're very large, for vine crops, seed by hand. So the seeding process is very similar, just as Jenny did it before. We start with our cubes and our seed, and most growers by hand will literally just do this just by hand. You can use a pair of tweezers, you can use your fingers, doesn't really matter. All we're doing is we are seeding one seed per hole. Most tomato and cucumber and pepper varieties that are bred for greenhouse production have a very, very high germination rate. So you don't need to put 2 seeds in a hole like some people will do. 1 seed per hole, you should have about 95 to 98% germination. So you'll get many, many good seedlings. So we don't need to worry about doing anything different. Now, with these, we're not using this one single 1-inch cube and placing it in a channel. What we're doing is we're growing a seedling that, instead of being 2 weeks old and going into the system, may grow in our propagation system as a baby plant, if you will, for 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, depending on where you are, depending on the crop. So what we want to do is we want to take this plant and we want to germinate it, just as we do with our small leaf crops. And as that plant grows, so basically what we're going to do as we germinate the crops is they're going to be separated into 1-inch cubes. So what you're going to have is a germinated seedling with one small cube. But a tomato plant or pepper plant is going to grow fairly large fairly quickly. So what we want to do is move them into a larger block. It's called a propagation block. This is a very common block that we use. It's a 4-inch, this is called the Jiffy pot. There are blocks that are made of rock wool. They're made of peat and other grow mix. These in particular are made with cocoa fiber, which is coconut husks, and some vermiculite and perlite. It's like very similar to a common growing mix that you get at a garden center. And as you see, it's very flat and it's dry. This is a compressed block for shipping. If you were to order them through us, you'd get a case of these, and they ship very, very well, and they're easy to handle. So all we do before use is we just saturate with water. I just took one of these just a few moments ago, and I just ran some water on it. And as you can see, it absorbs water and enlarges. So now this and this are exactly the same thing, but this is now holding on to a significant amount of water. So this propagation block is basically going to be your plant's home for the next several weeks. So once we have our germinated seedling, all we're going to do is take a well-saturated cube with some nutrient solution in it. We're going to place it directly into that cube. And then now we are able to put that in our propagation system. and we're able to raise that plant to a size of 4 to 5 to 6 weeks. So it is ready to go to its generative state, which when we plant it out in the greenhouse, we want it to start producing fruit. So this is just a small melon plant. It's a little bit small yet, but it's a perfect example of kind of what we've got. As you can see, the root system is essentially contained in the block, but we also have it's already starting to grow up through the bottom, nice healthy root system. And what we want to do is now transplant it to our growing system. So we can have different growing systems. We have a gutter system with coconut fiber bags. And in this case, we have Dutch buckets. These are also called battle buckets. They're very common in the hydroponics industry. So this is filled with a material called perlite. This is a very lightweight, porous material that is fed nutrient solution and allows the roots to penetrate and to grow in. So this will basically be the home for your plant for its productive life. So what we need to do is we have our beta bucket system and we have feed tubes, and each one of these tubes will provide the water and nutrients. So basically you have a stake or drip stake at every one of these buckets, and it will constantly be feeding the proper amount of water and nutrients. So what we do when the system is prepared and our seedlings are large enough to go, we have a nice wetted material here, and all we do is make a small indentation and we place that block on top, but we want to embed it a little bit so it has good penetration into the growing material. And then we're just going to take our drip stake and we're going to stick it right in here. So essentially, all the nutrients and water that the plants need will be fed through the cube, bathing the roots that are here. But very quickly now, the roots are going to penetrate into this bucket, into this growing material. As you can see, there's a large amount of volume. So as the plant grows and matures and starts producing fruit, here inside is where all the roots are going to be contained. So you have all the root systems contained very well in the system, but they're getting the constant supply of water and nutrients they need. And that's basically it. So we start with a small 1-inch cube, we germinate them, we move them into a propagation block, and then from the propagation block, we start with a heavy, nice set of roots, we put them into our growing system, and that's really the best way to get a good start to a healthy plant.
Okay, so we've looked at seeding in Oasis for the channels. We've looked at seeding with an auto seeder, seeding in the vine crop, the beta bucket. And now we're going to look at something a little bit different. We're going to look at microgreens. And a lot of you, if you have a little extra space on your propagation table, will be growing microgreens because they're a pretty profitable crop, especially just to use up some extra space. So I'm taking this same little cup that I have, and I'm going to pour out about 1 ounce of seed. And what we like using the Johnny's spicy microgreen mix. It's a mix of different brassica seeds. And so about 1 ounce of seed, which is about that much, will produce about 1 pound of microgreens in less than 2 weeks. So we grow our microgreens. This I've already wet it down with a little bit of essential and then wrung it out really good. But this is the medium that it grows on. It's like a felt. It comes in a great big roll. It's not very expensive at all. It's about $69, I think, for the full roll. And we just cut it off to fit right inside the tray. So you can see it's right there. And then you don't want it too wet because then it kind of weighs it down and you get all the seeds stuck in little traps. But then super easy. All you're going to do, you're going to take the seed and you're just going to kind of sprinkle it evenly throughout. Just like that. And like I said, about 1 ounce of seed will produce 1 pound of microgreens. And you can get, generally people don't buy a lot of microgreens, but you can get about $40 a pound for your microgreens. So for this tray, for 1 ounce of seed, you're going to get about $40 a pound for your tray. Then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take some water, and you can either do a hand sprayer like this, or we have a little air mister. And all you're going to do is you're going to wet the top of the seeds. You're just going to wet the top of the seeds. The mat is already a little bit wet on the bottom. I'm going to cover it up with just a piece of plastic, like this. And then I'm going to cover it for the first 2 days. with anything. We just happen to have some of these trays available, and it's going to sit like that for 2 days, and every day for those 2 days, I'm just going to come in and I'm going to wet it down once. And then these over here are what it's going to look like when you come back. You can see the mat underneath there. These are the microgreens. It's the same exact mix. You can see how nice and dense they are, how thick they are. And this is less than 2 weeks old. And this is when they're going to be harvested, and then you sell them by the weight. And like I said, this will be about a pound of microgreens. So microgreens are a great way. And again, we use our little plastic stakes to tell us exactly what day we seeded these, so we know how old they are. After 2 weeks, you're going to hook this up to your propagation seed. By then, the seeds will have taken root into the mat a little bit, so they won't be washed away. And then it's just on an automatic feeding schedule. So that's how you seed microgreens.
So lastly, one of the most common questions I get is regarding automation. People are always looking, whether this is a greenhouse system or indoor vertical growing systems. They ask about different ways they can automate to lower their labor usage and speed up their time and efficiencies. And one of the questions I get a lot is automatic seeding system. They like to look at the vacuum seeder like this, but it's still kind of considered a manual system. And so they're looking for an automated system where basically trays are pushed through, seeded and watered automatically. And there certainly are a number of systems that are available. Keep in mind, though, that a system like this, for the small mid-sized grower, is very, very effective. I mean, we're looking at, say, $500 to $600 for a system like this, and this would be good for growers up to, say, an acre, which is 43,000 square feet. So you may be seeding 100 trays a week and spending 4 or 5 hours a week, but you're seeding 26 or 27,000 cubes a week. So that's a very substantial operation. Once you go beyond that, it does maybe make economical sense to look at an automated system. But these systems are generally custom to your operation, and they can be quite expensive. Most are made in Europe and can cost anywhere from $12,000 to $40,000. And what they usually contain is a conveyor system that will take your oasis or whatever rooting medium and slide it on a conveyor under an automatic seeder that literally will just seed each row as it goes through. So as a tray follows a, say, 10-foot conveyor, it goes through, it gets seeded, it gets soaked with water, it gets drained, and then it gets moved over to go to a propagation system. So it's very handy and it's very effective. I've looked at a number of systems, both here when I was in North America and also when I was in Europe. And for large-scale growers, it is very effective. But I would say for under an acre of growing area, this is probably going to be a much more cost-effective option. But as you can see, as you've seen here today, there are many, many different options. Most growers have a whole array of different tools that we can use for our seeding or prep. So that's just one of many.
So just in conclusion here, you've seen a whole bunch of different things. You've seen hand seeding with all sorts of different types of seed. You've seen vacuum seeding, wet seeding, vine crops, microgreens. We talked a little bit about some of the automated seeders. So we have a couple of quick questions here, and we're only going to take just 2 of the questions. One of them is, Joe, when selecting seeds, are there specific varieties that work better when you're seeding for hydroponics?
Yeah, there are a number of different seeds. If you ever pulled up the seed catalog, you get to the lettuce section, you see literally 20, 30, 40, 50 varieties of lettuce. So there are varieties that are specific to hydroponics, or more specifically to greenhouse growing environment. They tend to grow better under certain lighting conditions, certain environmental conditions like humidity that you see, and also a lot of greenhouse growers focus on varieties that may not be as large or as uniform, but have better flavor or texture. So there's definitely, most seed companies have a specific dedicated greenhouse section, but if you call us at AmHydro, we can also give you recommendations for certain seed varieties.
And then the last question was about cleanliness, and do you have to wear gloves or any protective clothing when you're doing this? And certainly cleanliness in a greenhouse, as you can see, this greenhouse is super clean. And as a matter of fact, if you see all the empty channels, because this is a school-run greenhouse and they're done for the summer, they're going to clean out this whole section and really give it a good thorough cleaning. But yeah, you should always wash your hands, wear gloves. A lot of times I know the kids when they come here wear gloves, but definitely you should always consider cleanliness and make sure you pick up all the stuff that's on your floor, whether you have a nice cement pad like this or even just a gravel floor. Be sure and pick up all that sort of stuff. So that's everything for seeding. Thanks for joining us. You'll notice on the next 2 slides, and when you are sent the slide, or when you're sent the presentation for signing up for this, you'll also notice that there's a code. We have our seminar coming up August 3rd and 4th. And this seminar will be held here in Humboldt County, here in this greenhouse and in some of the local areas around here. But there's a special code that you can use when you sign up for the seminar that will allow you 2 nights. We'll pay for 2 nights of your hotel during the seminar if you use this code when you sign up. So be sure and do that. And our next seminar is July 20th, and that seminar, you can keep watching for that. That seminar is on, that webinar, the webinar on July 20th is on
26 out of your system. 26.
Oh, right. How to teach crop turns or 26 harvests out of your hydroponic system. So thanks for joining all of us. Thanks for joining Paul and Joe and I. And we'll see you next time.